The aim today really, a lot of people have noticed recently there's been more discussion around suicide and mental health in the media of late, particularly in the news in the last couple of days as well. It seems to be commonly described as the next pandemic that we're facing is one on mental health. So it's something that seems to be very much in the spotlight at the moment. Given that we work with a lot of people who are seeking help, inevitably we're going to have moments where we have clients come in that may have some suicidal thoughts. I think many of us know perhaps how to raise this conversation, but some people might not be so sure as to what to do once that conversation is started, or what happens after that conversation, or perhaps even how that conversation should flow. And, for that reason, this is why this is happening today. And I really have to start off by thanking the people who have volunteered to come forward and talk today, being Clive Girdham, Richard Hill, and Joe Lauren. And I'll just quickly introduce each. Clive, many of you will know, has incredible workshops around smoking cessation, modified rewind, incredible mentor as well. What a lot of people may not realize is that he has spent the last 7 years at Lifeline, talking to people on the phone, supervising, training people there as well. So his experience and knowledge here is just fantastic. Richard Hill, of course, many of you know, working with Dennis Rossi on mirroring hands. I have studied AIPC, and I know he was one of my trainers, popping up constantly there in the videos as well. Wrote a master's thesis on suicide, but also his first book, Choosing Hope, was written in response to suicide of a family member, and that's why this has become a very personal topic to him as well. And Joe Lawrence joins also from Perth, who's worked with Beyond Blue, 1-800-RESPECT, COVID mental hotline. She's currently putting together a mental health first aid course that is aimed specifically at hypnotherapists and will be available later this year as well. So I'm sure she'll mention about that. So thank you to the three of you for joining us today to talk about this topic. I guess it's an interesting one, and I guess the first question really would probably be along the lines of, what is it that we need to know as hypnotherapists when people come and talk to us and perhaps begin to show signs that they may be thinking about suicide? I know it's a big one to start off with, but, as a starting point, does anyone care to join in and give us some insight there?
I have thought about this particular question, Lawrence, and given that hypnotherapists can often be the last call for help before somebody looks for something different, they might have tried everything else. There is that possibility that we can face people who are at risk of suicide or have had some thoughts. So when I do my webinars around this, I let everybody know that they should be having this question on their intake forms. Have you ever had thoughts or past suicide attempts, self-harm, or any thoughts of harming anybody else? So that's something that we can explore with them in that intake level and have the appropriate authority to release information if it's required and things like that. So it is a question that should be standard across intake forms, in my opinion, as well as a conversation that needs to be had in person with each client as well. And it might not go anywhere, but some people don't feel comfortable about talking about their suicidal thoughts. So when you ask the questions, it just opens up that dialogue, and it can be a really helpful conversation to have.
Do you find many people are transparent and honest on their intake forms about that particular topic, or is it something that you need to perhaps be looking more for a read between the lines on?
It's a bit of both. I do find in my career, asking the direct questions around suicide risk, people are very honest. I've had a couple of people that, have had to kind of push a little bit, but most people, they want to talk about it. They want to have those conversations and explore what's happening for them. So whilst the intake form may be, I remember one client I had, and her intake form did mention past thoughts, but as I explored with her a little bit around that, the past thoughts were a couple of weeks previously. So having that dialogue was really, really important to find out exactly where she's at, what steps had she taken since, and what can we do about keeping her safe in the future.
And I know many people here probably have had some experience in understanding how to perhaps raise that conversation around suicidal thoughts. But what tips and advice would you give the group here in terms of, if they're talking to someone, they suspect that perhaps there's some discussions going on that are converging towards that. How would you raise that discussion point yourself?
A really good way is to, it's kind of circular in a way. Someone might say, oh yeah, I mean, what's the point? Or, oh, I've just about given up on this. And you might treat it as a surface level kind of comment of, a day-to-day, oh, I'm just going to give up on this. Yeah. But it's an opportunity as an entry point into a new conversation, because you can use lines like, well, sometimes when people say, what's the point? They're actually thinking of suicide. I'm just curious, have you been thinking of suicide? So to pick up on those invitations which are sent out, which are, anything to do with hope or future or giving up, or I can't live with this. You might misinterpret I can't live with this as I can't live with this pain. I need a Panadol. They mean I can't live with this. So you really have to be, you really have to take those invitations and then say, well, when people say they can't live with this, some people are actually thinking of suicide. Are you thinking of suicide? And that's an easy way of entering it.
Yeah, that's a good one. And just even a sort of a two-step on that sometimes is, see, I find those sort of generalized words, I'm sick of it, can't stand this, I'm tired of that, and that's a great word to pop in on as a that can segue you. Say, this. What do you mean by? What are you talking about with this? And then they might turn around and say, oh, this headache that I've had for 2 weeks, and you go, oh, okay, well, you need a Panadol. So there can be a number of indicators, but the capacity for us to understand as and hypnotherapy sometimes is not expected to deal with affective disorders in the same way that perhaps counselling or psychotherapy is, and all of that differentiating and delineating and siloing things, I think, is a huge mistake in understanding the nature of human engagement. I mean, if someone's engaging with you, then I'm not quite particularly concerned about what shingle they walk past to get into it. They're engaging with you, and so you need to engage as deeply and as sensitively as you can. But that's based on your knowledge and experience. For example, you might have someone, and here's a simple one. You say, what do you mean by this? They say, oh, life. It's real. And then it goes in, and then it starts to deepen, and then it starts to get heavy. You say, have you contemplated suicide? So, well, yes, I have actually. Now, you might sit there and go, oh, wow, I've done this and that. I've got some awareness. I go through. Or you might go, holy crap, I don't know what to do. You can just lean out and say, let's call Lifeline. Like right there and then. You delegate and you move, or you shift, depending on the urgency of the situation. And I'll just pass on. But when I did the master's degree, I did it because of the family. That was really what drove me, amongst other things. And I actually developed an entire program, a 2-day program, which there was a business entity which didn't survive, but there's a whole bunch of things if we go along that lots of neat videos and things that I can bring in on the day, if it's suitable, where we can look at some of these elements of what does it look like when someone's suicidal? Does it look like something? Does it not? And that's also inherent in what Joe and Clive were saying. Joe's saying, can you preempt this by opening up the door in the intake program? Clive's saying, just jump on it straight away and follow it through, because it doesn't even matter if they tell you exactly the truth or not exactly the truth. It's opening the door. So that'll probably do for me for the sec.
I think also what Joe said is very important, that everybody takes on board. People are more than happy to talk about it. You know, there's this, oh, you can't mention suicide because you might trigger them. No, you won't. No, you won't at all. You'd start a conversation is what you do. And this is probably, and it's a relief that finally someone has heard them and they can talk about it. Yeah. And it's like, oh, you know, they're telling you stuff they haven't told anyone else. They haven't been able to tell anyone else. And finally someone's listened to them. And then you can have just a normal human conversation. Yeah. So,
because if you understand some of the, and have a look at some of it, there's 4 people who are really got very strong and cogent comments on suicide. Probably one of the most cogent is a guy named Thomas Joyner. And he's got 3 elements that are very strong in burdensomeness, emotional distress, and there's a 3rd one, just forget the moment. Another guy named Edwin Schneidman, and he actually developed the term suicidality in the Suicide Network. Dan Siegel talks a lot about this in the sense of interconnection, and Marsha Linehan. So there's a few people that you can go and get an understanding. And one of the tasks in the master's course, like all these things, is to do a literature review. And so so I did a literature review on risk factors, and I just investigated. Yeah, I just investigated one journal for 3 years, and I found so many researched elements of risk factors that the paper I wrote in my comment was, everybody is potentially at risk at any given moment. And the guy who marked it only gave me 50% for the thing. But at the end of the course, he said he agreed with me, which was really interesting because he was a dude. And I was just a bit of a Richard. But so those interesting things that I follow through, getting some grasp of what it is, the sense of unbearable pain, this sense of burdensomeness, of doing everybody a favor. There's a half a dozen really strong concepts that can be useful to grasp.
I know there's a few comments coming through here. Paul's made a comment of have you or are you? And I think that's in reference to asking that question. 2 different moments in time is his observation there, which is a good one. And I think we'll come back to that because that is a really relevant point to this. Faith also said, and confidence and courage to have the conversation, ask the question. Maybe for some like me, it's a lack of knowing how to best and sensitively go about the conversation. It's the feeling heard, seen, and acknowledged thing then. Is that what you mean, Clive? So that was a comment to Clive before. And I guess that is the challenge as well, isn't it? Because, you know, I was going to say just before Clive made his comment that, you know, is it very much they're either going to admit to it or not admit about it? Is there ever that instances where people might say they're thinking about it but not want to talk about it in that moment? But I guess that's kind of different to what Clive has said just a little bit of a moment ago.
John Bunker brought up a really good point. I don't know if it was answered. He wrote, what about those people who are going to do it anyway? So in my experience, I've come across about, well, let's count them out as I say them, a different number of types. There's a person who suddenly something dramatic has happened in their life. They've just, the wife's left with the kids, or they've lost their job, they're being made unemployed, made redundant, or it's just something big has just happened. And up until then, they might have been a bit flat, but that's it. That's pushed them over the edge. So there's that sort of person. Then there's people who all of a sudden don't realize they find themselves having these frightening, intrusive thoughts which they've never had before. And it scares the hell out of them. They don't know where they're coming from. They find themselves, I'm out on the balcony and it's saying to me, just jump. And they're scared as hell. Yeah. Then there's the people who, you know, life has been so bloody miserable for so long and they might have tried before or they've done self-harm and to be perfectly honest, when you listen to some of these stories, you can understand why they want to end their lives. Yeah. And then there's the 4th point, which is John's point. These are the first 3 I would say would be happy talking to you. The person who's going to do it has got no intention of doing anything else but doing it. I don't want to be talked out of it. I'm going to do this. And they're not going to call you. They're not going to talk to you about it. They're not going to admit it. But mind you, what you'd have to ask, why are they in therapy? I don't think they're going to show up in your room. So I would suggest the vast majority of people who you'll come across are people who are trying to improve in some way because they're in front of you. And they'll all, and they'll fall into those first three categories, I think. There's possibly lots of variations on the same. But yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very true. They did a sort of just a review of numbers, and they found it. I can't remember the exact figure now. I've got it in my files, but it's well over 50% of suicides who were in some kind of therapeutic engagement gave no indication that they were going to suicide. But there was just something just recently that was saying suicide is not a homogenous, it's not a persisting thing that happens all the time and you're resisting it. It's a moment by moment experience. And I've got a lovely video of people saying, what stopped you? And there's people saying things like a dog barked or the phone rang. Somebody smiled at me. So there's these moment by moment, and that's one of the greatest difficulties, and which is one of the greatest difficulties of having something that can facilitate suicide. And one of the great problems with the prevalence of guns in some society is that where the greater prevalence of something like a firearm, which is immediately effective, you could, as Eddie Izzard, let's arm everybody with spoons. But in America, like 40 something percent by firearms, whereas in Australia it's only 15 or 20%.
So the thing on that as well, also with what Joe said, one of the questions needs to be around the frequency of these thoughts, because it could be that they've had one a week ago, or they've just had 25 of them this morning.
Yeah.
So the frequency of the thoughts, how frequently do you have these? But also the intensity, because sometimes they'll say, "Oh yeah, I've thought about it, but I'd never do it." But other times they're thinking about how they're going to go get the rope and where they're going to go and what they're going to stand on, and so that intensity is quite a level deeper. So it's you have to understand there's frequency, there's intensity, and it's ultimately what we're getting to is we're doing a risk assessment. Now, again, this isn't training. We can't. I don't represent Lifeline. I don't represent Assist or mental health, but it's what everyone needs to know. And it's ultimately what you're doing. If someone in front of you is saying, "Yeah, I have been thinking about it," then you need to be able to assess the risk. What do I mean by that? Well, if someone says, "Yes, I've been thinking about it," well, we need to go deeper. Well, do you know how you would do it? I hadn't really thought of that. Okay. If they say, "Yeah, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to drive a car off the cliff." Oh dear. So we've got some depth now. Then we want to know when. When do you think you might do this? Or when were you thinking of doing this? Oh, I'm doing it after this session. Now you're in a high risk situation. I've had people try to go outside and kill themselves in my session, and I've had the police involved. So don't be scared if someone says, "Yeah, I had been thinking of suicide," because they might continue thinking of suicide for the rest of their lives. And, when they die when they're 95, they'll die of old age, but they're still, they'll probably die thinking of suicide. Wouldn't that be a good way to go? If only I could do that. Oh, why didn't I do that? Yeah. But it's the people who are planning and have got a plan. They know that they've got access to tablets or a gun or a rope or, insert damaging material. And they've decided when they're going to do it. Now, I've had many clients, well, not many. I've had a client say, "Yeah, well, I'm going to give it till the end of the month, and if this doesn't work, then I'm going to do it." I said, "Great, we've got a month to work on then." But you know me, Lawrence. I can be quite humorous with people, and I get to a point where I can have humorous conversations with people who are suicidal, and they appreciate having a conversation. It's nuts.
Yes, I'm sorry, Joe. I just to jump in with a couple of quick things because I don't want to overplay. But there's one is just a quick reminder here to everybody. It is not unlikely, although it is not likely, that you will have somebody you will lose a client through something like suicide.
Mm.
And without going into it, because we haven't got the time, there is probably nothing you could have done about it, or nothing that you did had anything to do with it. All you can do is do your best, and once your best is done, then you have done your best. And I could expand on that, but we don't want to too much. But there was a wonderful set of interviews of people who attempted suicide from the Golden Gate Bridge and survived, and they were interviewed afterwards, and they're very, very informative, as well as I've done a lot of look into this. It was very difficult, but very valuable. But then there was one particular guy, and this planning thing is actually to your advantage. This is because you have a plan, you have materials, and you have timeline. And those three things increase the intensity. You have all three, then you're in trouble. But this guy, his plan was to go to the Golden Gate Bridge, jump off into the upstream side, obviously get picked up, get dragged under, because then things is all very dramatic and you die, and it's you go under the bridge, and then everything's obviously much better. But anyway, he got there and he climbed over the edge, and he's standing there on the cord. There's this cord they talk about, if you ever hear about this, is the big cable that is the outermost reach on the bridge. And he looked down and he realized he was on the wrong side. And he went, oh my God. And so he climbed back and then climbed over the handrails across the road. And they picked him up trying to get across the traffic because he didn't want to get hit by the cars, because that could kill you. And to get to the other side so they could jump off the correct space. So sometimes this plan is useful, because if you can disrupt it and interrupt it, that can be the dog bark or the phone call or the person smiling that interrupts their inevitability of the process.
Just coming back to something that Clive said before, mentioning that this is not a training, and he's absolutely right. This is a discussion, but certainly if it highlights that perhaps this is something we need to know more about, then I hope that we can, towards the end of this, perhaps follow up on some ideas as to where more people could access further training as well. I will just cover some of the questions here before the next point. Ernest says, is it a lack of confidence in ourselves knowing what to do or say if a client says they are suicidal? That is the blockage of asking the question. And I say it could very much be just to have that courage to be able to, in that moment, ask the question in a sensitively empathetic way, and to be able to explore that. Paul says, my understanding is that the last category is not likely to threaten to do it. Can you explain the difference? What for you is the difference between ideation and congruent intent?
You do that one, Richard.
Oh well, yeah, okay. Well, it's actually what we were just saying. The ideation. So you tend to have in the profile that I created, and my perception of things was there was no sign but potential, low risk, which is disturbance about life. Then you move into medium risk, which is ideation, and ideation of that suicide is a way out of this. Then you move into, and Clive pointed out, about 3 layers of high risk. But principally, the plan is when someone says, "I'm going to do it this way." That's enough to put you into high risk levels. I'm going to do it in this way, and I've prepared everything in order to achieve that goal, which could be as simple as Clive said, just saying, I have my car outside, so there's the car. So what's then the third thing is I have the plan, I have the materials, and I am going to do it at such and such a time. Now, these are where you have somebody who you can intervene. If you the video that I've got of it's a rather fascinating but disturbing video of the nature of how confusing it is, because a lot of people don't tell you that. They have no idea to do that. And there's this extraordinary picture of a guy on the phone on the side of the bridge, obviously calling loved ones. He then puts the phone down on the pavement because, you don't want to, someone could use that. and then he climbed over and jumped off. So the nature of the way their mentalization processes also change. So that can be another indicator, which is something that the vast majority of practitioners, from highly skilled to lowly skilled, can quite easily miss. But those three elements of plan, materials, available materials, and timeline are when you are when you need to actually intervene at the time. And we can talk about what I call my act now process. Then there's the ideation, and the ideation in relation to disturbance of life, and that's a thing I call Please Help acronym. So, and others have other good ones as well. But there's the three levels, with that fourth one being that very early one where they don't say anything, they don't do anything, and it just occurs, and no one knew, no one happened, and there's no way anybody could have known. And they're sometimes the most distressing.
Big one there, takeaway, which is really useful, is the confusion, because there's timeless times I've heard, well, yeah, I part of me wants, it's the usual thing. Part of me wants to, part of me doesn't. There's this, they don't, it's this juggling act. It's not all of me wants to do this. And so when you can work with the part of them that wants to keep safe, that's what you do. So there's this confusion where, like, well, why haven't you done it yet? Almost is going off in your head. And sometimes I ask that. So how come you haven't done it yet? What stopped you? And then that points to a strength or some kind of resource, and then you dig deep into that.
Yes, they want to get rid of the pain, and quite a few people will say, and when I've suicided, I'll be much better. And you go,
one of the things that I was told in very early in my training was, it's not that they want to die, it's that they don't want to live anymore.
Yeah.
And it's quite the distinction when you think about it. They can't see a way out. So providing support, referring them on, whatever we can do to help them. I think you might have said something, Clive, with the previous question about having the confidence to ask these questions of your clients, to contact Lifeline or contact Beyond Blue. I've had psychologists call in and say, I just don't know what to do here. And so we have the conversation, and then we guide the psychologist or the counsellor or whoever on what they need to do next and what steps they have to take. So if you are that therapist that is having a difficult time, give Lifeline or Beyond Blue a call, and we will walk you through it, and we will support you in that. So that's something to really consider as well.
Yes, I mean, two other resources that are potentially available to you is their GP, if they've been seeing their GP in relation to this. It's less of a case now because we don't have these sort of lifetime family-based GPs. And the other one is potentially, and I use the word potentially very particularly because sometimes it's not a case, is family members who have that. But I actually was talking to one suicidal chap, and I wanted him to get in contact with family members. And he finally, we realized that he was in his room in the house with family members in the living room, but he was unprepared to include them in his help. So it's complex. But there is just a quick one that Faye's brought up, which is really worth just jumping in this point, which is to what degree might this or might not this be just a cry for help on something else? So it's sort of like a catastrophizing of something that is less that is more manageable. And that's a good question. Clive and Joe, what are your sort of experiences there? I'd like to hear.
Would a cry for help have a definitive plan, showing that there's an imminent risk? The answer is probably no.
Yeah, that's right. Once you're in high risk, but in that ideation, in that sort of like, I can't stand this.
I think we only need look.
It's all a cry.
It's within Lifeline. It's black and white. It's either an imminent risk, or it's they go off somehow and look after themselves somehow. Yeah, and it may be that you haven't actually known. They haven't known that these other resources, like free financial counselling, was available, or you insert external resource that they didn't know could help them. Okay, so there's that. But then if someone is we don't worry about. Okay, I wonder if they're okay now. It's what we're concerned about is this an imminent risk? Is this person unsafe now? And that's what you want to be concerned about. I don't think you really need to be, you don't want to go home thinking, oh, I wonder if he's killed himself yet.
Yes. Yes, I know. No, you're absolutely right. Absolutely.
No, you can't do that. If you feel that if there's an imminent risk, then you just call the police. It's that simple.
That's right.
But what you can do is you can steer them towards other resources, like Richard was saying, like a general practitioner, a family member, a friend, somebody at work that they hadn't spoken to for a long time, or suggest, well, did you know that there was these other external resources that you could call, like Lifeline or Beyond Blue or the Blue Knot or whatever, and you can steer them to all these other resources which wasn't even on their radar, which is then going to just begin to dilute a little bit the bigger problem.
Which gives you almost immediately one of the activities that you can do this afternoon.
Exactly,
is begin to build a resource list.
Yeah.
I have a piece of paper, a prepared piece of paper that's stuck on my wall. I don't even have to go and look it up in a book, which has these phone calls plus the other ones I've added. Someone rang me the other day and said something was going on, and I was quickly looking at the list and I say, oh, here's the closest hospital. In their case, it was the Hornsby mental health unit. I just said, here they are. I can't deal with that. Away you go. So that resource list is enormously helpful, and even if it just sits in the drawer and you never pull it out in your whole career, fabulous. But the day you do is the day you will assist yourself in managing the process as much as you'll assist the client who may need it. Sorry, Joe, you've got...
I was just going to say on that, having little cards as well that you can give your clients. So if they are having suicidal ideation, but they're not that imminent risk, just a card with Lifeline, Beyond Blue, Blue Knot, saying just the regular contact numbers. And for you as practitioners, at Beyond Blue, we work on low, medium and high risk. So for a medium risk, we will refer on to the mental health triage. So having your local mental health triage in your state, having that number available if you need to, it's kind of called defensible decision making. So you're referring on to the people that can handle it. You can defend your decision, document it clearly that this is the actions you've taken and this is why. So just getting your contact numbers. I think I've probably got a list I can send Lawrence who can post out. And I've got a little card that I can email a template if that's helpful to everybody. Just let me know.
That's great, because Faye was just asking that, what sort of list. I mean, I also include things like domestic violence and those various other refuge type of places, drug assistance places. Now, as you go along through your career, now I'm fortunate to sort of engage with a whole bunch of different levels. So, I've got a bunch of people. In fact, some of my supervisees are fantastic therapists that I recommend people to quite often. Don't talk to me, go talk to the bloke I supervise. But these things, this is also, and Lawrence, what you do, having the network, and Clive with going and Helen Midas going through, creating places where you can have immediate phones that you can pick up or messages you can send out on the internet that can get. You've got to be careful that you don't just ask everybody and anybody. I mean, build up those people that you have a rapport and a resonance with. Because as lovely as everybody is, not everybody is necessarily their intentions. Good intentions are not what we need sometimes.
Can you clarify that, Richard? What you mean?
Oh, I mean, I've got some lovely friends of mine who are therapists, but I wouldn't ask their advice on much.
Right.
And then I've got other ones, but that's because I have resources. I mean, I can ring up and contact some people who are higher up in the capabilities. I mean, I'm lucky to know people like Stephen Porges and Luke Cozzolino and John Arden and some of these and Bonnie Badnock and Pat Ogden, and lucky me. But so there's a bit of a hierarchy as well. But it wouldn't surprise me if one day I rang up Clive. He got a phone call from me because I know he's got certain skills, and I would ring him more for my own sense of satisfaction. I just had a really difficult experience. Clive, can you help me? I've got him on my mental list as somebody that could help me. So that's what I mean by that.
Okay.
Can I ask also, we're talking about raising the conversation of suicidal people, and we know that if there's a high risk, kind of to call the police or to act on it immediately. What about in those situations where someone's talking about that they have considered suicide, that perhaps the plan isn't as well thought out yet, or that it's something that's kind of on their radar? What duty of care do we have in order to assist here, or what is the responsibilities of the hypnotherapist in that situation to make sure that we're doing the right thing by that client?
Great.
Clive, you've covered this a bit, and Joe, but clarify that again, because that's a good question.
Yeah, I think it really depends on how pervasive the thoughts are. So if you are assessing them as low risk, then you would encourage them to go see their GP. I think Richard mentioned that earlier. That's a really important one, and giving them the contact numbers for all the services. If someone's thoughts are more pervasive and they're having their thoughts and they've got a means but they're not quite sure whether they would act on it, I would probably be leaning towards medium risk. And that's where I would pass their details on to mental health triage, or give the client the contact for mental health triage.
Yeah, that's an important point there, Joe, is it can only be unless you're living with a person or a family member, you can't call the mental health unit. So they have to call. Well, and it differs in states as well. But but that calling like a critical assessment team or a hospital health mental health unit, because I've been through it. And they go, no, I cannot take the call from you. It has to be from them or the immediate family member, and they wouldn't take the call.
I've never had that issue.
Yeah. So what state are you in?
I'm in WA.
Yeah, maybe it's a New South Wales thing.
Even just calling while the client is there is a possibility as well. So you are delegating, you are passing it to somebody else, or giving the client the number and documenting that very clearly that that's what you've done. Because the medium risk, that is beyond a lot of people's expertise. So that's where you do need to pass it off.
To answer your question, Lawrence, is in a different way. You've got a client in front of you who in the past might have even attempted, or they've self-harmed, but again, they're having those recurring thoughts again. Another pattern. Again, we're not medicos, so we can't talk about medical things. I always say, are you on meds? Every time. Yes, they are. Pretty much every time I've spoken to somebody who's about to kill themselves, they're under the care of a psychologist and they're on medication. I've spoken to very few people who haven't been under some sort of therapy. So that echoes an earlier point that there are a lot of suicidal people in therapy, but a lot of them are on medication. And I have seen countless numbers of people, both face-to-face and on the phone, who have not had their medication checked since day one. And they've not had it reviewed by the psychiatrist. They just refill it. They fill a script and they're just going down and down and down. And they're not reporting that back to anybody.
Particularly bipolar with lithium. It's really important.
So if they were, one of the things is, well, that doesn't seem that medication. I'm guessing because you're not medical, but so you could say, I'm guessing you're thinking that's not working for you then. Well, no, it's not working. It's not doing it. It's not helping. Have you thought about going back and speaking to your doctor about this? Because, this is, a lot of times your medication has to be adjusted until it does get the right result for you. So, and a lot of antidepressants can cause suicidal ideation.
Yes. And probably just a nice thing to highlight what Clive just did there was, as hypnotherapists, you would not be considered by the, bureaucracy as being qualified to give any particular recommendations. So it was that invitation. Have you thought about? And wouldn't it be a nice idea? And I've heard of somebody, you can do the Dear John thing. I've heard of someone who had this thing, and this is what they did. So I think they're on a professional level. There is a wisdom about not saying you need to do this.
You can't do that.
That's right. You've got to be very careful.
Yes. Yeah.
I got a couple of things which might be nice with the acronyms that I created way back then. And as I reviewed it all for this stuff, I thought, Jesus, this is a really good course. But, I didn't want to spend my life sort of being a businessman. But the first one, for the high level, for that high degree where you have a plan, materials, and timeline, or all three, it's what I call act now. So for those with a pen there, so A for alert. So be alert, but alert in your situation. So you might be in your practice, and you might have a secretary there or another person. Call them in, make someone aware, because you may have to call authorities very quickly. Second is to contain. Now, this containment might be serious if someone is particularly agitated, and which is exactly what Clive was talking about. They went out the door. We had to call police. He had to do things. If they're saying, "I'm going to kill myself with a car," you take the car keys. You take hold of that. Third one is T for take it easy, and that's you. Take a breath. So you've alerted, you've contained. Now just take a breath. Third one is and then name it. So this is suicidal. O, open options, because this is what is the difficulty with suicide. Suicide is suicide or nothing. As Edward Schneider says, he says they've come from a life where there's a handful of possibilities to where there's only two. Everything gets better, or I kill myself. And there's so open options. And the W of now is to work with. Not work on, not work at, not work for, but work with, which is again what Clive and Joe have both said. Cooperative action. You can't ring the hospital. It needs to be cooperative. Who is the relative that you're going to go and see? Now, you may not have this sort of experience because it possibly might be that with hypnotherapists, you're not getting people who feel they're deeply emotionally disturbed, but you might be prepared to cancel the rest of your day. So that's another aspect of alerting and containing. You say to someone, ring all my appointments and put them off, please. And there are many of us in my side of the field who've ended up spending the day with somebody. So that's that. Now the other one is please help. And please help is that earlier stage, that ideation, or this talking about the fact that they can't bear, that life is becoming less bearable. And so it's protect, listen, engage family, affirm life, support them, and enlist. So enlist other help. So that's the please, and the help is something that you can then do once you've got those things settled, is look after their health. So you act on their diet and their sleep and so on and so forth. Consider their environment. You might need to remove them from a dangerous environment, as you might with a drug addict or someone. Learn more yourself and them. So educate. So do some education things. As I say, increase their capacity to respond, their response ability, and provide what is necessary that you are capable of providing. So there's just a couple of things. And I'll send these little acronyms. They're kind of cute. And I think there are some other people that have done some very good ones as well. So that's please help, protect, listen, engage family, affirm life, support and enlist, look after their health, their environment, their learning, and provide what you can.
We do have a few backlog questions, so we'll make sure that we jump on them. Bianca's raised a really relevant one, which is what steps can we take in person versus telehealth?
Well, that was investigating what just keep it simple. I mean, something's missing for them, as Rob McNeely would say. They're disconnected from something. They're missing some resource. And sometimes that resource is something practical. It's, like I say, I mean, they're telling you that their relationship's broken down and they're really depressed about it, and she's left and taken the kids. Well, who are they talking to? Well, I'm not talking to anybody. Well, did you know there's variety of helplines you can talk to. You can talk to me. You can talk to me. You can call me anytime. You know, anything that's just a resource around something that's missing for them. So there's usually they're not talking to somebody, or usually it's something. You know, it's either relationships or finances, or some sort of abuse. The big three, I would think. And there's a variety of external resources who can help with that. It could be medical, so GPs, medication. Could be, look, this isn't really, I'm not sure I'm capable enough. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to help you. I think I need to refer you on to someone who I know is going to do a better job. That might be a better thing, you know, because you start taking on the client's problem. It's not your problem. I keep telling you, you just can do your very, very best. But if you're not confident, then you can say, look, I know somebody who can do this, who's got a bit more experience in this. And I'm going to call him right now, and we're going to have a chat on the phone right now. How's that for you? Yeah, good. Okay, let's do that. So there's a million and one things you can do. You just, you know, it's not hypnotherapy. You don't think, well, where's the script for that? No, you've got to start being a human and connect.
Yes, the thing that sensitive observation and responsiveness.
How can if it was outside the therapy room and it was a friend, and they said, "Oh, look, I mean, this is how you should think about it. If you're speaking to a friend and you suspect something's not going quite right for them, you say, "Just you're all right. You seem a bit down. You seem you've been a bit quiet these days." And they reveal eventually that they've been having some suicidal thoughts. What would you do then? And then, you know, you'd probably explore and listen and shut the hell up and not try to fix and just ask about feelings and ask about meaning. When you say that, what do you mean by that? And how does that feel for you? And that must be, and validate. That must be awful. Pain. I can see you're in pain. What have you, and then explore, well, what have you tried? What's worked in the past? Or, oh, okay, look, I'm not really sure I need to, I'm concerned and I want to help you. We need to find a way to work this out somehow. I mean, so have you considered going to see your doctor? You know, something, you got to have a conversation.
Yeah, it's a lovely example of working with.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Now, Lawrence, I've got a little video which could be very interesting. Is it possible to turn on screen sharing, or is that excessive for the moment, or what do you think?
I've just made you co-host, so you can screen share.
Okay, just have a little look at this. This is actually from the film Pay It Forward. And some of you are thinking sort of, you know, gosh, I can't manage this. What do I do? And this is really beautiful. It's obviously written with someone with either wonderful intuition and sensitivity or actually psychologists in mind. But this is one of the Pay It Forward characters, and he's a drug addict who's sort of now trying to pay it forward, and comes across a woman who's considering suicide, and he does everything wrong in the first set of processes. So have a look at that. So why is he not getting a response from her? And then he does something that's really right, and it absolutely works perfectly. Let me just share this. I'll share. We'll open it. And I'm hoping that someone tell me if the audio is not coming through, because that will be a bit dull if it doesn't. Although there's subtitles.
I can't hear any audio if it's supposed to be there now.
No. I think there's subtitles.
Okay.
See, he's talking at her, ordering her, trying to instruct her. Yeah, don't tell your story. Now he asks, common ground. Change their perspective and their frame. And that reminded me of something else.
Mm.
Yeah, so that was just something. But there was a perfect example of of him as the therapist, just doing everything wrong, trying to tell her what to do, trying to interrupt, trying to instruct, trying to do something, and then he just realized if he just was somebody for her and made her somebody to him, that can be enough. I'm with you. And the guy who's called the Angel of the Gap, principally he just got to people, like they said, I'm going to suicide. He said, well, wow, you got to have a hell of a story. Do you mind if you just come and tell me that story, have a cup of tea, and then you can come back and do whatever you want. And what he did was, by saying have a cup of tea, and when they said yes, so when he said have a cup of coffee, and she said yes, it extended her imagination, her future, into at least the amount of time it takes to boil water, and that can be enough.
Absolutely.
I will just say that some people are sharing some insights and observations in the comments section as well. We may not have a chance to get to all of them today, but I will make sure they go up online with this video presentation as well. Paul's kind of asked a question we kind of touched on, but I guess he's asked in a different way as well. Has a movement online changed the way you raise this issue, given you aren't physically with them, and how do you contain them?
Well, it's just the same as taking calls. I'm not with them. It's no different to ringing a call line. You'd be doing your best to connect and build and listen non-judgmentally, not give advice, hear the pain, the story. How has it come to this? Really listen to them, and ultimately somehow looking for some confusion about part of them not wanting to and part of them wanting to, and just trying to find out what is it that might be of assistance and what else they might be looking for. It wouldn't be any different at all. It's identical.
Yes, every experience is unique, and you just follow it to its own frame. Obviously, being in person is different than being online, but that doesn't mean that it changes the ability, as Clive said, to be connected and to be concerned.
You will connect. And Lifeline use a model called CARE these days. They used to use one called CFRED. But the C in both of those models is connect. And the way you connect is ask about the pain and the feelings and what some of that stuff means. Shut up and listen, and not try and fix anything. And you join them in a very deep conversation, which to them is them being validated and being heard for the first time, and for finally being able to talk about that domestic violence and that horrible sexual abuse and that, this, that, and the other, without having someone say, well, no, you need to get yourself fixed.
Yeah. And this, I've got another little acronym there, is the we can, which is welcome and engage. That's how you create the we. And then your can is exactly that: connect, assist, and network. So
why I asked the question is, I had a client recently who, at the end of each session, I wasn't sure whether they're going to go off and top themselves, and they weren't in Australia. They were on the top of a mountain in Colorado, and I went direct with this person. This person's also clinically trained, so I knew that they were aware that maybe some of the signaling they were providing me with was hinting at suicide, if not being really explicit, when they said they can't see tomorrow. No matter what they were trying to do, they couldn't see tomorrow, and they were going through some pretty traumatic stuff. And I did go there and ask them, but the situation is there's no way I could possibly contain them. And also the other aspect as well, what am I going to do? Call the police in Colorado and ask them to turn up on the doorstep? And that seemed to be the case, that would have been overstepping in that instance, because this person hasn't actually self-harmed at all. So to me, that would have been an overreaction to what they were signaling. The best I could do was be really direct with them and ask them whether they were contemplating suicide. And this person said, I'm not saying it in that way. And that's not your worry anyway. That's not what I've come to see you for. And so it put me in a really interesting bind, because for weeks I just felt like he was on a bit of a precipice, and I just wasn't sure where it was going to go. He was even going to be able to turn up to his next session. So that's where the contain part was a bit of a challenge. And if I'd called the police and sent them to him, I might not have seen that client again. But it was very, very nice.
But you're absolutely right. He wasn't high risk. He wasn't exhibiting those or sharing that stuff. But here's the other thing: a therapist is not there to make someone better. A therapist is a resource that the client uses to enable them. So your task, and he made it clear, your task is to do these. This particular, I'm utilizing you to achieve these certain goals, and I don't wish you to go any further. And sadly, he could have been one of the sorts of people that would lose, and that's where we need our supervisors and our carers and our friends and so on and so forth. Losing it's. It's hard. I'm just, as you say it, I'm thinking of some of the things I've had to consider over the years and deal with. There's nothing fun about being close to someone who loses their life, one way or another. But so this comes to all kinds of other philosophies. But Paul, I think you did exactly what you needed to do at the time for the client at their request.
And I think also importantly, what you just said there, Richard, is something that you need to take to supervision and debrief over. We would have monthly supervision where we would take our most difficult calls or cases and make sure there was no, vicarious trauma or people were still, they weren't hanging on to stuff, because we're not here to fix people. No matter, we're here to guide people. Just because I know time is running out. I just saw the most important question was from Bianca just there. Most of us are not trained on helplines. What do we do in the most urgent cases where there's an imminent risk? Well, firstly, you don't call an ambulance, because ambulance people don't carry guns or can break down doors. You call the police. And if it's got to that, and it's got to that with myself and on phones, I'd say 100 times, and it face to face, probably half a dozen times. And the police are really, really good. They are. They when they come along, and you can see the kindness. They don't go in there going, "Oh God, who's this idiot?" They are so kind, and they handle people so well And it blows me away how these guys, these police on the front line, because they're our frontline mental health workers, police. They really are. Then you call the police, basically, is the answer to that one.
Yes, I had my daughter actually was in a situation where her friend was having an ice episode, and she called the police and they came there, and it was quite interesting because she was threatening and screaming all kinds of things, and the police actually said to my daughter, "Can you get her to say she's going to hurt herself?" And they said, because when she says that, then we can act. So there are constraints. But when someone says they're going to hurt themselves, you can then bring in the police to intervene. But if someone's just saying, "I'm thinking about it," or I don't know, then there are other mechanisms and avenues that you need to go for. But if they're actually standing there with a knife or with their keys in the car, then as Clive has said he did, he was then able to call the police, and they were then able to act. And the good thing is my daughter did get this lass to say she was going to kill herself, and then the police moved in, and she ended up recovering, and she's now got 4 beautiful kids, and it's a wonderful story.
Yeah,
I am conscientious of time, and that dawning realization that this topic could easily go for many hours,
months.
Yeah, but, there's so much to cover that
lifetime.
we haven't even touched on yet, including things like self-care as a practitioner, and the legalities around these sort of things too. But I guess if to kind of wrap it up, if people did want to explore this topic more, what recommendations would you three have in terms of what they should look at, or what additional training might be out there that they should consider doing?
As minimum, I think ASSIST, which is Advanced Suicidal Interventions Training, ASSIST. That's run by Living Works, I think they're called. But basically, it's a two-day about how to ask the question, how to assess the risk, and how to ask the question. Okay, and with role plays, and role plays can be really challenging for people, really challenging. So ASSIST, and then why not do mental health first aid? That's a good 2 or 3 days too, and go into it. And then if you really want to get some hands-on, then there's plenty of volunteering organisations that will take you on and train you up, like Beyond Blue, or I don't know actually. I know Lifeline. I can't speak for the others, but I imagine that there'd be opportunities to work for some of those other ones too. And as I mentioned to you, Lawrence, that some of the best training I've had is being at Lifeline.
I remember you saying to me not long ago, one of the best things you could do is jump onto Lifeline and volunteer your services. Yeah. That's my penny worth.
Yeah, but Joe, you've got your preparing this course that you're leading, which is
it is the accredited program that I teach, the Mental Health First Aid through Mental Health First Aid Australia. And we will be going over scenarios as well and how to ask that question. Someone did comment before about how being comfortable asking that question. For all of us, I imagine that Clive, you definitely. I've been asking the suicide stuff for over 14 years now, so I'm very comfortable with conversation. But I remember when I first started, and I just practiced asking these questions in front of the mirror, or just by myself, or practicing with a friend, till you get comfortable having that conversation. And it does take time, it does take practice. So being kind to yourself and going easy on yourself if you do find yourself in this situation, because we all have experience around this, and if you don't, then give yourself a little bit of a break around that.
Yeah, from my perspective, thanks, Lawrence, for reminding me, because I found all the work that I did, but it's the course that I prepared is really for much more in-depth stuff. So I do actually go into understanding the nature of medications, looking at the neuroscience, exploring the theorists. So more than, sort of the next phase after sort of a first aid framework. So, once I finished writing this book, this lovely book on the science of psychotherapy, which we're writing next year, that might be an idea, because for those that want to go deeper into it. So I think that because the other answer that's come out of the three that I hear here is actually the resources are all around you. But certainly in the short term, this afternoon, if you're going, oh gee, I really don't know anything, then there's some wonderful things just on the internet. We had some links that people provided in the the messenger area that are really good just to go, oh okay, that makes sense. I'm kind of on this, yeah.
If you go to, for those of you who are looking for, who are all these resources? Because there's some great resources out there. If you go to the Lifeline website, on there is they call it a toolkit. I think it's called a toolkit. I'm just looking at it now, where it is resources. Yeah, they've got under resources, they've got a toolkit. And what it has is the list of lots and lots of other organizations and how to handle individual problems, everything from domestic violence to child abuse to everything else, and links to the other organizations. So yeah, get yourself educated about external resources is a great thing you can do this afternoon.
Yeah. Absolutely. Good comment.
Replay will be up today as well, and it doesn't mean that the discussion needs to stop just because we've had this discussion today. I'm hoping that people will continue to add comments and responses to the replay of this video as well, so that the conversation can continue.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely.
And I'm really happy to take emails from people if you've got some sort of deeper technical questions. I'm saying that because I'm guessing there's not going to be a lot of those. So in case there is, so if somebody's actually interested in some of those, I can give you sort of some more heavy academic frameworks to look in if you wish. And
if anyone's remotely triggered by this, we could be, and someone here could be triggered. Someone could be sitting in here right now thinking, okay, well, is that it? I was really looking forward to it being a 2-hour call, but it's up now, so I might as well. Anyway, so if anyone's remotely triggered, then you need to reach out. Okay, and everybody here, everyone here is a nice human, and
that
you're aware of all these other resources as well.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you did that, Clive. One of us would have, because we naturally know that, and so I certainly am open to anybody that wishes to, as well as so many of your friends.
People get triggered in role plays. I've seen, because I've done hundreds of role plays in different. I've seen so many people triggered by a very simple role play. So this is here we're talking about if this was on the radio or the TV right now, they'll be saying, if anyone's if this has triggered you, 13, 11, 14.
Absolutely.
There'll be a list of resources underneath. So let's make sure we've got everyone here covered.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hello.
I'm sorry we haven't been able to get to everyone's questions today, but I have to thank Richard, Joe, and Clive for their time this afternoon and offering their expertise and insight and wisdom on this. And thank you everyone for coming along today as well to join in on this discussion, this conversation. And I'll get this up online this afternoon, and let's continue the conversation online from there.
Thank you for organising live. It's really great.
Pleasure. In the meantime, everyone have a wonderful afternoon. If you're in Melbourne, it is sunny, so maybe walk no more than 5 kilometres. And
boy, that forced people to walk 5 kilometres. My God. Okay.
Take care, everybody. Thanks for your day.
Thanks, everyone. It was great.
Yeah.
Bye.